The night was supposed to bring relief, not danger. As the cold lights of the hospital hallway flickered, 2 officers stepped quietly into the room of a woman who had already endured more than most people could imagine. She looked fragile, half awake, and completely unaware that the situation around her was about to shift in a way that made no sense. What the officers didn't know was that this patient wasn't just anyone. She was a highly trained military officer, someone who had survived battlefields far harsher than this quiet hospital ward. Everything happened in whispers and hurried movements, the kind that make you question what's real and what's not. The woman sensed something was off, a tension thick enough to cut through, but her body was too weak to respond. The officers leaned over her with an urgency that felt wrong, as if they were trying to silence a truth before it surfaced. But just as they moved closer, a sudden shift happened. Her eyes opened, sharp and alert, revealing the strength they completely underestimated. And in that split second, the officers realized they were not dealing with a helpless patient at all. What happens next changes everything. For a moment, the room felt frozen, as if the air itself held its breath. The officers stepped back slightly, startled by how quickly her expression changed from sleepy to sharply aware. They exchanged a glance, the kind that carried unspoken worry, as if they had just crossed into something far more complicated than a routine visit. The woman didn't speak, but the way she watched them made it clear she understood more than they expected. Her name was Maya Lewis, a decorated military officer who had recently returned from an overseas assignment. The official report claimed she was admitted for exhaustion, but there were whispers among the staff that her condition wasn't as simple as it appeared. Some said she had tried to alert someone about a classified mission gone wrong. Others believed she had uncovered something involving people far outside the military ranks. Whatever the truth was, it made her presence in this quiet hospital room feel dangerously important. The officers, who initially thought they were handling a delicate situation, now sensed they were standing in the middle of a story much bigger than a medical check. Maya's slow, steady breathing and calm stare hinted that she hadn't lost control. She was simply waiting for the right moment, and that moment was coming sooner than anyone expected. The longer the officers stayed in the room, the more uneasy they became. Maya could feel it too. Their shoulders were tight, their voices low, their actions strangely cautious, as if they weren't sure whether they were protecting her or being watched themselves. One of them kept glancing at the hallway, checking for someone who never arrived. It was clear they weren't acting on their own. Someone had sent them here with instructions that didn't quite add up, and now even they were starting to question why. Maya sifted through the fog in her mind, trying to connect her last clear memories. She remembered the briefing overseas, the classified files she wasn't supposed to see, and the warning from a colleague who begged her to be careful. She also remembered the moment she realized someone inside the system was filtering information, hiding something that could put people at risk. That discovery had followed her home, shadowing her every step until the day she collapsed and woke up in this hospital bed. Meanwhile, down the hall, a nurse watched the room from behind her station. She had noticed the officers arriving without signing in. She had seen the way they spoke to each other, too quietly, too rehearsed. Something felt wrong, and she wasn't sure if Maya needed medical help or protection. Inside the room, Maya kept her breathing steady, pretending to be weaker than she was. She needed answers first. She needed time, and the officers unknowingly were about to give her both, just not in the way anyone expected. The room felt smaller by the minute, the tension thickening like smoke that refused to clear. The officers moved closer again, their hands hovering over her bed, their voices low but urgent, as if they were trying to push her into compliance before she realized the danger fully. Maya's heart pounded, but her face remained calm, unreadable. Every instinct she had honed in the military screamed that this was more than a misunderstanding. This was a trap, and she had to be ready. Outside the room, footsteps echoed in the corridor, slow but deliberate. Maya could hear faint whispers, commands given and acknowledged, though the words were muffled. Someone else was coming, someone whose arrival could tip the balance in an instant. Her mind raced through options, each one risky, each one potentially explosive. The officer's earlier confidence was now replaced with hesitation, tiny cracks forming in their composure. They didn't know who they were dealing with, and that mistake could cost them everything. The nurse at the station fidgeted with the phone, debating whether to call for backup or intervene. Every second stretched longer than the last, the hospital's usual hum replaced by the sharp pulse of impending confrontation. Maya shifted slightly under the covers, her gaze locking on the approaching shadow in the hallway. She knew she had to act, but the question hung in the air. Who would make the first move on? What would the consequences be? Just as Maya's mind raced through her next move, the door to the room creaked open, not by the officers, but by someone entirely unexpected. A figure stepped inside, calm yet commanding, and the air shifted instantly. It was another officer, but not the type she'd seen in uniform before. This one carried an authority that made even the 2 hospital officers pause. The stranger's eyes swept over the room, landing on Maya with recognition, and then on the officers, who suddenly stiffened as if realizing they were no longer in control. "Step back," the newcomer said, voice low but firm. The officers hesitated, unsure whether to obey or resist. their earlier confidence completely shaken. Maya felt her pulse spike. This wasn't a rescue, it was something far more complicated. This new officer seemed to know exactly who she was and, more importantly, what had happened overseas. The presence of this figure added a layer of danger Maya hadn't anticipated. Meanwhile, the nurse at the station noticed movement down the hall. Someone was slipping past security, unseen, possibly connected to the earlier orders that sent the officers here. Suddenly, the hospital felt like a cage. In every hallway, a potential threat. Maya realized that the people in the room weren't the only ones with agendas. Secrets she thought were buried were resurfacing, and the balance of power was shifting in ways no one could predict. The tension exploded, leaving everyone, Maya, the officers, and the viewers on the edge of what would happen next. The room erupted into a tense standoff, the air crackling with unspoken threats. Maya finally moved with the precision of someone who had survived far worse than this hospital corridor. With a sudden controlled motion, she leveraged her military training, guiding the officers back without a single strike, just enough to assert control. The newcomer officer stepped forward, and in a brief, sharp exchange, they revealed that the hospital officers had been misled by false orders from a hidden faction trying to cover up sensitive information. Maya had uncovered overseas. Realization hit the officers like a shockwave. Their panic turned to shame and fear as they understood the truth. They had almost silenced someone who was meant to be protected. Maya's calm, commanding presence forced them to step aside, leaving her and the new officer alone for a brief, critical moment to confirm the details of what had been manipulated and who had orchestrated it. The tension in the room didn't dissipate entirely, it shifted, heavy with the weight of what had been revealed. Just as Maya was about to take action, the hospital lights flickered, and a faint, distorted alarm began echoing through the corridors. The final twist hit. The hidden faction had anticipated this confrontation and triggered a lockdown. Now, even after asserting control, Maya and the others faced a new threat, one that would test everything they thought they knew and force them into an even more dangerous game. The lockdown sirens blared, but Maya stayed calm, her training taking over. She coordinated quickly with the new officer, mapping the safest way through the hospital and ensuring the misled officers understood the truth. Together, they guided the hospital staff and patients to safety, turning confusion into coordinated action. The tension that had gripped the room slowly began to ease as the immediate danger passed. But the knowledge of the hidden faction lingered, a reminder that the threat wasn't gone, it had just been exposed. Maya took a deep breath, reflecting on how quickly ordinary spaces could become battlegrounds and how often courage required patience as much as strength. The officers who had misjudged her now understood the importance of careful judgment and the consequences of acting without full information. The nurse, who had quietly watched and acted, received recognition for her vigilance, proving that even small choices could have a huge impact. As the hospital lights stabilized and calm returned, Maya realized that the experience had changed her. She wasn't just a military officer anymore, she was a symbol of resilience, of truth prevailing in the face of deception. The ordeal had tested everyone involved, but in the end, it showed that awareness, courage, and integrity could overcome even the most dangerous situations, leaving a lesson that would not be forgotten.